Pastor Roy Gerhart from Galloway United Methodist Church in Franklin, Pennsylvania, sharing a few words of encouragement to help us follow after Jesus. As we wrap up this first week and looking at Solomon and the pursuit of wisdom, I want to bring that to a focus on Christ. In the first chapter of 1 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul wrote to distinguish the wisdom of God from the wisdom of men, our known natural wisdom. And he makes a point of saying this, that the cross and what we preach about Jesus as our Savior by his death on the cross and his resurrection seems like nothing but foolishness to a lot of people. I mean, it just seems like an absurdity to talk about God coming into this world and making some kind of difference by dying on a cross and rising again. The apostle said Jews are always looking for a sign, and this doesn't look like any kind of miraculous sign. It looks instead like a big flop. I mean, how do you have a hero who gets crucified? And the Greeks also, he says, which are the non-Jewish people who really appreciate intelligence, education, philosophy, things like that, they look at it and say, this is just totally bogus. I mean, this is an anti-hero. This is not someone that you could really look up to. It just looks like some sort of religious idiocy. So they are just dismissive to the message of the cross. But the Apostle Paul declares that the cross, however, and that Jesus Christ is truly the wisdom of God. And he says this, he says, look, God has chosen the weak, the foolish, the things that don't amount to anything in this world in order to make it clear that he's got a plan and he's got a purpose that is better than our best strength, our best understanding, our best accomplishments. All of those things pale in comparison. And to point this out, he says, for one thing, look at you. Most of you didn't amount to anything. You were not some of the brightest and best. You were not the big shots. You were not the most brilliant, of the prettiest, the most accomplished. No, he said, most of you didn't really amount to anything. But now that you have come to know Christ, you've come to know the power of God in your life, and you're being transformed. God has elevated your life through his Spirit and through his grace. He's making something new of you that is, and the new and improved is so much better than whatever you were before. And he said he's done this by doing everything the opposite of what anyone would expect. Instead of the Lord coming into this world in flesh and blood with all kinds of power and conquering and flashy introductions, Jesus came into this world in such a lowly state that Isaiah the prophet had centuries before described him as someone who would have no beauty, no majesty, that anyone would be attracted to him. But in fact, he would be rejected and counted as a loser, dying amongst sinners. And so Jesus comes and does everything the opposite way that we would expect. That if you're going to go places, then be a big shot. Have wealth, have power, exercise all of that. Show your glory and your big substance of impact. Instead, Jesus comes into this world humble and really situated amongst the weakest and the lowliest of all people. His birth was in a lowly place. His life was in a backwater place. Everything that he did was from the lowest level, truly ground level, right there with you and me. And he did this so that he could put on display God's salvation in a way that could reach not just the rich and famous, not just the bright and beautiful, but the weakest, the lowest, the most broken people on earth. And he would help us to see that brokenness in our own lives by coming as broken bread and spilled out wine for our lives. In this, he's put on display God's real wisdom. Instead of just winning over converts by being a big shot, impressive, or overpowering people, he comes in a manner that invites us to discover God's love for us, his mercy, and to recognize him as the healer and the savior of our lives out of all of our brokenness and need. And so that we can lay aside all of our effort and trust and truly be set free. This is the wisdom of God. The Apostle Paul said, our holiness, our redemption, the incredible power of God that has transformed our lives. May God bless you today. And as you share his good news, may God make you a blessing wherever he takes you.